As for the wartime orphans of Vietnam, the children once called the dust of life, a story this morning from Terrence Smith about two men who worked to save them and to save one another, too.
Glad to see you.
Very glad to see you, sir.
For Do Nop Lam, it's been a long journey from a prison in Vietnam to the West Wing of the White House. But every step of the way, he was helped by Richard Hughes, an American friend who waged a relentless campaign for his freedom. This Sunday morning, a story of friendship and perseverance.
The dust of life, the street children of Vietnam were called during the war, so ever present as to be all but invisible, blown this way and that, inconsequential, of no more interest to anyone than dust itself is. But they were of interest. Two men, one of this country, the other of their country, risked much to help the street children of Vietnam. And as Terrence Smith is about to tell us, the risks did not end with the end of the war.
This was a big event, I think, when this went up because the United States blocked Vietnam's admission, you know. Well, there it is.
The star, the yellow star.
Yeah, yeah.
On a chilly spring morning, two friends, one American, one Vietnamese, are seeing the sights in New York.
Okay, well, I'm glad you had a chance to see the UN. That's over there is a famous monument.
Their memories together go back to the 1960s. The American, Richard Hughes, was a conscientious objector who went to Vietnam as a civilian. The Vietnamese is Do Nop Lam. During the war, both were moved by the suffering of the homeless kids living on Saigon sidewalks, children known to the Vietnamese as Bui Doi, the dust of life.
I was shocked by their cynicism, and I was shocked by their resentment of themselves and their disbelief in anything, anybody. And the first thing I had to do was convince them that they're worth caring about.
Hughes first took the kids into his Saigon apartment, then established centers in Saigon and Da Nang that provided food, shelter, and affection for some 1,800 of the war's youngest victims. It was called the Shoeshine Boys Project after the way they scraped out a meager living. And through a Life magazine spread, newspaper and television coverage, it began to attract attention.
Richard Hughes, this is your life. My God.
In 1971, Hughes was the featured guest on Ralph Edwards' This Is Your Life.
I should tell you that I've been inspired by the work that you and the Shoeshine Boys Foundation have done.
Among the surprise guests, the then ambassador to the United Nations.
Because in the way I look at things, you are truly working for a world at peace.
I participated in it because at first, you know, there were some people, Americans like Dick, and some other American and some Vietnamese. We just were moved seeing the children in Vietnam suffer so greatly.
Economist Do Nop Lam was one of two Vietnamese volunteers who helped run the project and even kept the centers going for a short while after Hughes was forced to leave in 1976. He was the last American to leave Saigon 16 months after the capital fell to the North Vietnamese.
I know what they went through to help me in terms of their family, their time, their political danger during the war when the Vietnamese government didn't trust them, and after the war when the new government didn't trust them. I knew what they went through, but I knew that they...
In 1990, long after the Shoeshine Boys project had closed, Lam and Duan Thanh Liem, a Vietnamese lawyer and co-director of the shelters, were arrested for alleged anti-socialist activity. Their real crime? Their association with Americans like Dick Hughes.
Did you feel any sense of guilt or responsibility for their condition?
Well, of course, I've always felt a sense of responsibility about anything in my connection with Vietnam. And if they were arrested and my name came up in involvement, yes, I felt responsibility about that. From journalists, just regular folk, anybody.
Hughes had thought Vietnam was behind him. Instead, he has spent the last 5 years in a tireless campaign for Lam and Liem's freedom, writing thousands of letters to the State Department, senators, anyone who might be able to help.
Great news about Dong Ab Lam. Congratulations.
Finally, after 3 years in prison, Lam was released and 3 months ago came to the United States as a refugee.
Was this a lot of work? It was a lot of work. And that's the time I was working at a law firm at night. This, while I'm doing theater.
Dick Hughes' real career is on the stage.
It's not true. It was an accident.
He's an actor with the Circle Repertory Theater in New York. He managed to continue acting, but his persistence with the Vietnam case left him little time for sleep.
There were literally times when I sat in front of a typewriter and almost wept. I was so tired. But I knew it was going to work.
Yeah, it does work.
It works.
It did work, yeah. Otherwise, I am not here now.
The campaign exhausted not only Hughes, but his funds. After purchasing this $17,000 full-page ad in the New York Times on his credit cards, Dick Hughes was forced to declare bankruptcy.
It was one of those just human responses that on the moment you do it and you begin and you run with it. The men and women working that project were really a family, brothers and sisters under an intense thing for a long time. And it was like someone in your family was arrested. It was unacceptable. And spending 8 years there in an intense kind of a circumstance, half of my heart, soul, and life is there.
Hello.
Glad to see you.
Very glad to see you, sir.
Among those who helped seek Lam's release was a former Foreign Service officer in Vietnam, Anthony Lake, who is today director of the National Security Council.
And thank you very much for what you've been doing for me after my arrest.
Lake promised to continue efforts to free Lam's colleague Liem, who is serving a 12-year sentence in Vietnam.
It's a nice view, see? There's the World Trade Centers.
This view is very famous.
Meanwhile, two old friends are catching up for the lost years. They symbolize the reconciliation that should be possible but hasn't yet been achieved between their two countries. They also want to set the record straight on the true nature of the Shoeshine Boys project.
I'd like a recognition for the work that Lam and the others did, that this was really a wonderful effort in the middle of the war by just average people. There was no hidden agenda. A little chilly. Yeah. I owe the people of Vietnam so much. They have reordered my life by teaching me simplicity, brotherhood, how to touch, and a reason for carrying on, that it does count. If you followed this water, you go right up the east side, across the top of Manhattan where I live, and you come down the west side.